low ejection fraction, 15%, denied TAVR. Why a second opinion matters before agreeing to hospice. My name is Patrik Hutzel from IntensiveCareHotline.com, and this is another quick tip for families in intensive care. Here at IntensiveCareHotline.com, we instantly improve the lives for families of critically ill patients in intensive care so that you can make informed decisions, have peace of mind, control, power, and influence, making sure your loved one always gets best care and treatment, even if you're not a doctor or a nurse in intensive care. So today I have a reader's question who says the following. Hi, Patrik. My mom is 71, works full-time and collapsed at work back in May. She was diagnosed with pulmonary embolism and aortic valve stenosis. They did a balloon valvuloplasty on July the 8th, but say they haven't seen any improvements. They state that surgery and the transthoracic aortic valve replacement, also known as TAVR, are not an option and want to move her to hospice tomorrow. They started her on something similar to dialyze to help her heart and lungs with edema last week. She has hypotension, roughly 70/55, and an ejection fraction of 15%. I realize that 15% left ventricular ejection fraction is really low, but have read success stories with TAVR and open heart with the same numbers. Should we get a second opinion before agreeing to hospice? If you could give me any advice, I would be forever grateful. Thank you, from Yosa. Now, before I answer Yosa's question, you might be wondering what makes me qualified to answer questions for families in intensive care. Now, I have worked in critical care and ICU nursing for over 25 years in 3 different countries, where I worked as a nurse manager for over 5 years in intensive care, and I've been consulting and advocating for families in intensive care here at IntensiveCareHotline.com since 2013, and I can very confidently say that we have saved many lives for our clients in intensive care with our consulting and advocacy, and you can verify that on our testimonial section at IntensiveCareHotline.com, and you can verify it on our IntensiveCareHotline.com podcast section on the website IntensiveCareHotline.com. So I want to say clearly up front, Yosa, the fact that you're asking this question, whether you should get a second opinion before agreeing to hospice, digging into the numbers such as ejection fraction of only 15%, and refusing to just accept there's nothing more we can do at face value, that is exactly the kind of advocacy that saves lives and prevents regrets. You should be proud of yourself for pushing back and looking for answers. And let's break down what's happening in plain language. Aortic valve stenosis is a narrowing of the heart, of the aortic valve, that makes the heart work much harder to pump blood out of the body. Severe aortic stenosis, left untreated and inadequately treated, leads to heart failure. A pulmonary embolus is a blood clot in the lungs which puts extra strain on the right side of the heart and can worsen an already struggling heart. Balloon valvuloplasty is a procedure where a balloon is used to stretch open a narrowed valve. It's most often used as a bridge or temporary measure, not a permanent fix. Valves frequently re-narrow after valvuloplasty, especially in weeks, and it's common for the improvement to be modest or short-lived. Next, an ejection fraction of 15% means the heart is only pumping about 15% of the blood in the left ventricle out with each beat. Normal is approximately 55 to 70%. This is severe heart failure territory. Next, a blood pressure of 70/55, which is also known as hypotension, combined with severe aortic stenosis and an ejection fraction of 15%, tells me your mother's heart is currently in cardiogenic shock or very close to it. And that renal replacement therapy is very likely being used to manage fluid overload because pulmonary and peripheral edema need to reduce because her kidneys and heart can't keep up on their own. This is sometimes called cardiorenal syndrome. Let's now look at why the team might be saying thoracic aortic valve replacement and surgery aren't options and why that's not always the final word. I fully understand why a low ejection fraction of 15% combined with hypotension and multi-organ strain makes a treating team cautious. Open heart surgery, which means a surgical aortic valve replacement or repair in someone this unstable, carries very high risks, and that is a legitimate clinical concern, not a scare tactic. I looked after plenty of patients with low ejection fraction and heart failure when I was nursing at the bedside in ICU. But transthoracic aortic valve replacement is not an option, is a conclusion, not a fact on its own, and conclusions like this deserve scrutiny, especially when the family hasn't seen a dedicated heart team such as cardiology, cardiac surgery, and structural heart TAVR specialists together give a documented multidisciplinary opinion. Here is what I want clarified before accepting that TAVR and surgery are truly off the table. Number one, has a formal heart team review taken place with a structural TAVR interventional cardiologist specifically weighing in, not just a treating cardiologist or intensivist? Was a dobutamine stress echocardiogram done to check for low flow, low gradient severe aortic stenosis with contractile reserve? This distinction matters enormously because some patients with a low ejection fraction and severe aortic stenosis actually improve significantly once the valve obstruction is relieved, because the low ejection fraction was partly caused by the valve problem itself, not irreversible heart muscle damage. Number three, was there an attempt to hemodynamically stabilize your mother first, for example, with inotropic support, an intra-aortic balloon pump, or short-term mechanical circulatory support like Impeller or ECMO, as a bridge to a TAVR decision, rather than ruling TAVR out completely while she's at her most unstable and most vulnerable? Number four, what were the exact valve gradients and aortic valve area before and after the valvuloplasty? And what was documented as the reason valvuloplasty didn't show improvement? And number five, was a formal frailty and risk score, such as an STS score, calculated, and does it reflect her baseline? Someone who was working full-time until May, rather than only her current acute, critically unwell state. Low ejection fraction with severe aortic stenosis is a recognized high risk, but not automatically hopeless combination. TAVR has increasingly been used in exactly this population because relieving the valve obstruction can allow the heart to recover once it's no longer fighting a near-closed valve. That's why the stories Yosa has read about people with similarly low ejection fraction numbers going on to have a TAVR or surgery successfully are real. Outcome depends heavily on the underlying cause of the low ejection fraction, contractile reserve, and whether a genuine heart team assessment was done. And what I'm going to say next is one of the most important things I say to every family in a situation like this. Get every page of the medical records before you make an irreversible decision like moving to hospice that you might severely regret. That means get the echocardiogram reports, including the dobutamine stress echo if one was done, the cardiac catheterization and valvuloplasty procedure report with actual pressure gradients, the ICU flow sheets and hemodynamic trends, and the renal replacement therapy orders and fluid balance charts. Families are often told a summary version of events verbally at the bedside under enormous emotional pressure. The medical records tell you what was actually measured, tested, and documented, and they let an independent, experienced ICU clinician assess the situation on the actual numbers rather than on how the conversation was framed. This is exactly the kind of case where getting the records and having someone independently review them before agreeing to hospice can change the outcome, or at minimum give you real peace of mind that every option was genuinely exhausted. And this is precisely the situation me and my team help families navigate in intensive care every day. On a consulting call, we can go through your mom's situation in more detail. We can look at the medical records and hemodynamic numbers with you, help you understand exactly what the treating team's stress echo gradients and heart team documentation show or don't show, and help you formulate the specific pointed questions to ask her ICU and cardiology team so you can advocate for her properly and make sure a genuine second opinion, ideally from a TAVR experienced structural heart program, has been obtained before any decision about hospice is finalized. Now, you can reach out to me here at intensivecarehotline.com by calling me on one of the numbers on the top of our website, or by simply sending me an email to support@intensivecarehotline.com, or you can book an appointment with me by clicking on the schedule appointment button on our website. Now, if Yosa's mum does not stabilize, she may need to go to hospice. But if Yosa's mum does stabilize, whether through further cardiac treatment or simply through better management of her fluid and hemodynamic status, and she ends up needing longer-term ventilation support, which could be invasively with a tracheostomy or non-invasively with BiPAP, CPAP, or she needs a tracheostomy without ventilation, there's a proven evidence-based alternative to indefinite ICU or aged care placements, which is intensive care at home. And you can find more information at intensivecareathome.com. With Intensive Care at Home, we are providing a genuine alternative to a long-term stay in ICU with 24-hour critical care registered nurses at home. Like I said, for invasive ventilation with tracheostomy, non-invasive ventilation with BiPAP, CPAP, tracheostomy without ventilation, all for adults and children. This is a real, predictable and permanent way to keep patients like Yosa's mum out of ICU long-term or a hospital bed. And it applies equally whether the goal is ongoing, curative, rehabilitative care, or a comfortable, well-supported palliative care pathway and approach at home, if that ultimately becomes the right choice for your mum and your family. But you need to make that with full information rather than under pressure. Now, with Intensive Care at Home, currently we're operating all around Australia in all major capital cities, as well as in all regional and rural areas, in all states and territories, basically. We are third-party accredited and NDIS registered for intensive care at home nursing. And if you're watching this, if you're in the US, in Canada, in the UK, in Ireland, in India, anywhere around the world, and you're interested in intensive care at home as well, go to intensivecareathome.com and you can contact us there as well. We can help you there. Now, the bottom line is this. Yosa, you are doing exactly the right thing by asking whether to get a second opinion before agreeing to hospice for your mom. With an ejection fraction of 15%, hypotension and a valvuloplasty that hasn't shown improvement, there are specific answerable clinical questions about contractile reserve, hemodynamic bridging, and a genuine multidisciplinary heart team review that deserve to be asked and documented before hospice becomes the plan. Get the full medical records, get an independent clinical review, and don't let a decision this permanent be made on a verbal summary alone. We are here to help you do exactly that at intensivecarehotline.com. I have worked in critical care nursing for 25 years in 3 different countries, where I worked as a nurse manager for over 5 years in intensive care. And I've been consulting and advocating for families in intensive care since 2013 here at intensivecarehotline.com. And I can very, very, very confidently say that we have saved many lives with our consulting and advocacy because of our insights, and you can verify that on our testimonial section at intensivecarehotline.com, and you can verify it on our intensivecarehotline.com podcast section where we have done client interviews. And because our advice is absolutely life-changing, right? The biggest challenge for families in intensive care is simply that they don't know what they don't know. They don't know what to look for. They don't know what questions to ask. They don't know their rights, and they don't know how to manage doctors and nurses in intensive care. And that's why we help you to improve your life instantly, making sure you make informed decisions, have peace of mind, control, power, and influence, making sure your loved one gets best care and treatment always. And that's why you can join a growing number of members and clients that we have helped over the years, saving their loved ones' lives. And that's why I do one-on-one consulting and advocacy over the phone, Zoom, WhatsApp, whichever medium works best for you. And I talk to you and your families directly. I handhold you through this once-in-a-lifetime situation that you simply cannot afford to get wrong. And when I talk to families directly, I also talk to doctors and nurses directly, asking all the questions that you haven't even considered asking, but must be asked when you have a loved one critically ill in intensive care. I also represent you in family meetings with intensive care teams. We also do medical record reviews in real time so that you can get a second opinion in real time. We also do medical record reviews after intensive care. So if in case you have unanswered questions, if you need closure, or if you are suspecting medical negligence. We also have a membership for families of critically ill patients in intensive care, and you can become a member if you go to intensivecarehotline.com, if you click on the membership link, or if you go to intensivecaresupport.org directly. In the membership, you have access to me and my team 24 hours a day in a membership area and via email, and we answer all questions intensive care related. In the membership, you also have exclusive access to 21 ebooks and 21 videos that I've personally written and recorded. And all of that will help you to improve your life instantly, make informed decisions, have peace of mind, control, power, and influence, making sure your loved one gets best care and treatment always. And all of that you get at intensivecarehotline.com. Call us on one of the numbers on the top of our website, or simply send us an email to support@intensivecarehotline.com with your questions. And if you like my videos, subscribe to my YouTube channel for regular updates for families in intensive care. Click the like button, click the notification bell, share the video with your friends and families, and comment below what you want to see next, what questions and insights you have from this video. I also do a weekly YouTube live where I answer your questions live on a show, and you will get notification from the YouTube live if you are a subscriber to my YouTube channel, or if you are a subscriber to my intensivecarehotline.com email newsletter at intensivecarehotline.com. Thank you so much for watching. This is Patrik Hutzel from intensivecarehotline.com, and I will talk to you in a few days. Take care for now.